ABAS Productions, Scene 7, Take 1.
Welcome everyone to ABAS Seasonal Bonsai Series. August in hot, sunny Sacramento. We're here in my garage with the fans going and trying to stay cool while we do our filming.
All right, here are our 4 trees, our 4 Trident maples, all Tridents, all somewhat different. This is interesting. This time of year in Sacramento, in California, we can defoliate a second time because we still have a long time to go before we hit fall. We have such a long growing season. We've already partially defoliated these once, most of them. And then this is our second time around to reevaluate them and adjust it so it increases ramification faster if you can do it twice in 1 year. And these are so healthy. So we're going to go through each one of these different. This one's coming back nicely, beautiful, and that's the more refined, and it's slower. So we treat it differently. So our first one, again, we're just keeping on here. It's going and going and going. Trunk's not getting a whole lot bigger. You can see how long the inner nodes are. These things are huge. The leaves are huge. These are still nice and small, which makes me happy. I'm fine with that. So we're going to keep going. And we'll probably fertilize again. I don't see any of the fertilizer on here, so I think it's all gone into the soil. So that's nothing. Easy. All right, our second tree was a problem because the top did not bud out. So our decision was, we think we're probably going to cut it lower down. So we're going to just defoliate this whole thing right here and then see what else is underneath it. But we can't cut this off yet, but we'll at least see what's going on. These are our main branches and they need to keep growing. So we're going to let those grow. And these are our root grafts that are doing just fine. Had a little bit of sun damage because it's been brutal here. All right, so Renee and I are going to cut off all of these. All right, we've got this back somewhat, and you can see how thick and heavy this is. I think we're going to cut off, but not right now, this huge lumpy mess. And then we have a branch in the back over here. This is going to be our new apex or somewhere near there. But we still need to cut these back so they don't get too big. This is a slow process. So we're going to cut that one off. Let's cut this one farther back because see how thick that is? And there's a stub underneath it, but I'm going to go way back there. And nothing on these. We still have a back branch. Okay, so there's hope. We'll revisit this in November. We're going to fertilize it, revisit in November. Challenger. Look at this beautiful growth. And we've let everything just go. So now we're going to defoliate this. We may want to do a couple of thread grafts, but we'll have to decide which ones we want to use after we defoliate down to at least these smaller leaves, and then go from there. All right. Now, where do we want to thread graft? Turn it around again.
See the front.
Okay. Apex. These have to grow, but at some point it's going to be cut back. Maybe there, maybe even back there. That might work, depending on how fast it grows and how thick it gets. That looks dead. That is dead. So our last thread grafts, one was here, there, and there. So we have, and I believe this is all going to be completely cut off, because that's sticking straight up. It's right next to the apex. This can't move. This would make a really good thread graft that grows. Since we're going to cut back there, we can just let both of these grow, and that's fine. And then that could actually be a thread graft also. Thread graft. So that means I can cut these back shorter. This one I want to ramify. So I could cut it there. I could ramify there. If I go back farther, still doing good. Oops, this is dead right here. Cut that off. So we're trying to heal this wound right here, and it's, as long as we have this, that's going to keep healing. This is at a funky angle. I can keep going back. So we're going to keep going back. So, okay, so I have that. I have this nice little guy, this back here. This is getting kind of, oops, wait, see, this is all by itself. So I have this that I want, this that I want. I'm leaving this just so it'll help heal a little bit the stuff up above it. I can live with that. That's a thread graft. Can't cut that one, can't cut that one. This one can be cut. This one I'm going to cut. This long internode I'm going to cut there. So now anything up here, I don't want this. This is the apex. This is coming out straight. I'm going to cut this, start right there. This is helping that wound heal, but I think. And then when you've got this long thing like this, you just cut it short, because that's the kind of internode you want, not the long ones. Not like, see this? See how, actually this whole thing is long. And I have to have buds back there. So if I cut it here, all that's going to happen, still have this long internode, and then it's going to take off again. So we're going to cut it back all the way back. So anytime you have these long guys, not using this, eventually this is going to have to be cut back because there's nothing right there. But for now, all these get cut back to the base. You just leave a little bit there. That's dead. Actually, I think the whole thing is dead. There we go. That's live. So we want stuff down here. So to do that, we have to cut these shorter. Okay, what else? So keeping those in those. Stuff like this. Yeah, just cut it way back. This is sticking straight up. Incredibly ugly. Got all this other stuff right there. It's going to bud back. You see all those little lines where old buds are. So
Yeah, I think we're going to cut that whole thing off.
But for possible back budding, I'm going to cut back farther. So you've got that, but then right behind it you've got all those buds back there. So we're going back there. Don't care about that one too much. Don't care about that one. How about this one? That would be nice if that back budded. We're good?
And see how much the
These
grafts
guys
have
have grown.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're actually, it looks like we might get roots on this side also. The roots are on the back side and it's threaded through, but roots will grow where these are in the soil. So that could be interesting. We might luck out. And then still healing. Just let that go. It's got a nice seal. It hasn't separated off. That's good. Those were old thread grafts that didn't work. So we're going to have to regroup on that one. Did we do this? This one hasn't been treated, has it? Is that because we were going to cut it? Oh, that's because we were going to cut it off. But you can see where it's already healed right across there. So it won't really matter. That's going to get cut off at some point. All right, Challenger.
Back onto the bench. Okay, so here we have our more refined tree. Just take note of how small the leaves are on this. Having all the ramification helps keep the leaves small and the inner node short. It's been growing since our last video, and I've been just pruning it back to the profile, just to kind of keep the things from getting too long and heavy. So not too much to do. We have something up here, this little guy poking out here. We're going to cut this back to the profile. And this guy, do we need it to get thicker? I might let this grow a little bit. It's a little bit, I could thicken this a bit, so I'm just going to let this grow for a while and reevaluate it a little bit later in the fall. See what it looks like, if it gets a little bit thicker, since this is one of our lower primary branches. Also in here, this one's spiking out. Probably don't want that to get any bigger, so I'm going to cut this one off, cut it back into the profile. It's too bad. This one we got a nice division here, but this inner node is a little bit long. I'm just going to leave that for now. Probably cut it back hard come November when we do our fall pruning. Well, I might just end up cutting this whole thing off. I don't know. I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
I have to give myself time to think about these things. We don't want to make a rush decision. We may do that, we may not. But it kind of fills out the profile. The tree looks better with this out here right at the moment. So when I'm looking at it on the bench, it looks better.
Okay.
We'll take care of it a little bit later. Right now, I like the look of it with that sticking out there. Kind of fills out the profile of the tree. And then we come around to this branch that we're developing. It looks like this is now thick enough. I really don't want this to get any thicker. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this guy off.
Which, the bottom?
No, this one.
Okay.
Cut this off because it's already, as you can see, it's thickened enough. We don't really want it to get any thicker. It might even be a little bit too thick already. But this one could be a little thicker, so we're going to leave this. This one, let's see.
Where's it coming out?
It's coming out.
Ew.
Well, actually, I'm considering.
Oh. Yeah.
I'm considering at some point maybe taking this whole thing off and going with this to develop, because I kind of let this one get a little bit thicker than I really wanted it. But for now, I'm going to leave it. I may come back, take this whole thing off, and go with this one to start, developing the branch ramification.
When would you wire this?
It's already been wired.
That's where you want it.
Yeah, okay. It's already, I put a wire on it. It's got movement down here. We're going to cut it way back anyway.
Okay. So
we don't need any movement out here. So that's about it for this guy right now.
Do you want to shorten that one too?
No, I want it to thicken a little bit, so I'm going to let it grow a little bit. I want it to thicken a little bit.
For taper.
Are you going to defoliate?
No, I am not. Question is, am I going to defoliate it? No, I'm not going to defoliate it. It's already been defoliated once. The leaves are pretty small. It hasn't, really pushed out a lot of really strong growth. So I think it would be a little bit, maybe a little bit hazardous to the health of this tree if I totally defoliate it again.
How do you feel about the every other leaf?
The every other leaf? I could do the every other leaf on the top, perhaps. Like with the stronger leaves coming out like this, I could do that. In fact, I already did it to some of them, but...
What's the advantage of doing every other leaf?
It's a partial defoliation, not a full defoliation, and once again, the apex of the tree is the strongest. So we need to keep this under control while we let the bottom part grow. So if we partially defoliate the top and send the energy to the lower branches, so these will get stronger, that's kind of the goal. Because if you just let it grow, the apex is always going to get stronger.
But will it bud out again if you partially?
If you partially defoliate, it does not bud out again. If you do a partial defoliation, in order to get it to bud out again, you need to do like 80 to 90% of the tree. You have to take off 80 to 90% of the leaves to shock the tree into producing a new flush of growth. So if you just partially defoliate, it really doesn't do anything, but it does weaken the top and allows, if you look at some of these branches on the bottom, see this one's very weak right in here. If you look at this branch right here, it's very weak. You can see that the lower branches on this tree are weaker. So partially defoliating the top will send energy down into the weaker parts of the tree. So we'll do a partial defoliation on the top. Just cut off some of these bigger leaves. I think that's all we're going to do for this for now. So back on the bench. Yeah, see, this is, you can see that these branches are getting really weak down here. So take a little of the energy out of the top. Okay. Here are our juniper subjects. They've all just been sitting on the bench growing. We did all the work on 1, 2, and 3 last time. This time we're going to do the work on number 4. So briefly, we're going to go over each one. This one's just our young early stage tree. We're just letting it grow. You can see it's starting to spike out with growth. So this is just going to go back out there, and we're going to continue to let this guy grow. Our pre-bonsai, the last time we did a pretty major pruning and wiring. You can see it's starting to push out new growth, but if you will look carefully at the new growth, it looks like it's going to go juvenile on us. And that means we probably took off too much foliage last time. But it's early in development, so I'm not too concerned about that. We did get a little bit of damage to some of the finer growth here. I believe that was probably mechanical damage from when we were wiring and moving it around. Kind of manhandled it a little bit too much, but it's growing fine. It's all the tips are starting to push out new growth. So this one back on the bench, let it grow. Carmen's going to do this one.
All right, so kind of very similar to that now. And there's a little bit of juvenile foliage. Not bad. Basically the same thing as the other one. You'll see in Same thing, a little bit too aggressive with these tips, but they'll just come right off and everything else is growing around it. So pinching, taking those off, and it looks like it's starting to grow. There's a little, that's probably going to be juvenile right there. So you can tell the difference. It's not smooth, it's rougher. But as long as there's not a ton of it, I'm going to be happy.
And so this is our more refined tree, and last month we had decided that we were going to let it grow a little bit more because it really hadn't started pushing nice healthy growth, but as you can see now, we're getting nice strong growth on the top and on the tips of all the little branches. So we're ready to do some major work on this. First thing we're going to do, I think I talked about this earlier, is trying to improve the base because it's so narrow down here. We're going to add some shari into the front and into the back, so we'll force the lifeline on each side to pump up, and hopefully, if it works the way I've been told it should, we should get this lower part of the tree to thicken up, which would make it a little bit better, make the trunk a little bit more interesting. That's the first thing. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on the pad development, continue with the pad development. If you look at this tree, it is a literati style, and kind of to my taste, there's a little bit too much foliage on it to make it an effective, literati style. So one of the things I'm going to be doing is looking for opportunities to cut back and make these pads smaller. If you come in here and take a look at this one, we have all of this coming off back here. It's budded out. It's growing nicely. I'm probably going to take this off and reduce the size of this pad. I'm going to look for opportunities like this to push the growth back. Same thing over here in this area, looking to reduce the amount of foliage here, reduce the pad size, just to make it look a little more compact. Then we're going to go through and prune the tips of all of these little guys. You can see how this is spiking out. We're going to prune these back, so we're going to force the growth back inside to get more density to the pads. So that's the plan for this tree. First thing I'm going to do is go back and cut some of these back. We've got some nice growth back inside now. I can take some of this back. Okay, so we shorten this. I'd like to shorten this pad, but we don't really have enough growth back inside yet. We do have some new growth budding from this junction right here. So for the time being, we'll leave this intact, and in the future, develop this and be able to shorten this back a bit. This pad is looking pretty good. Still want to shorten this a little bit also. It's getting a little bit too dense. When I'm looking at the pad, I want to make sure that I don't cut it back too far. I want to be able to maintain the outer profile of the pad in a, kind of a clamshell shape. Pad formation should be more in a clamshell profile. So you have, the outer edge and then it tapering back as it fills in. So if I'm going to be pruning this back, I want to make sure that I maintain that outer edge of that the pad for the profile. So I'm looking at this thinking, let's see, where can I cut this back to? Okay, let's move around to this side. Looking at this one, I'd like to reduce this also. But once again, we don't have quite enough growth back in here to cut it back yet, but we have some little strong budding back in here. That's going to give us what we want in the future. Perhaps next year we'll be able to cut this back, maybe even sooner. I don't know. Cutting this back and reducing the size of this pad. Moving around to this side, we have quite a bit of stuff coming out here, new growth up in here. So this, we have this, We have this coming out here, and we have a lot of back budding, so that's good. Can I take this off though? You can take this whole thing off and just work with this. If I take this off, that's going to leave this as a pad, keeping the profile, the outer edge of the profile, the pad. Let's put some wire in there. I just have to use these. Yeah, we're going to cut this back. We're going to go with these guys. Cut this off. Go with these guys. We have a nice, edge here. Profile of the pad we can maintain. Have some stuff budding out back inside here, which will fill in the top of the pad. Give us that three-dimensional profile. We've shortened it quite a bit. See the difference? We're pushing it back in. We want to maintain the length. This is our primary branch, so we do want to maintain this a little bit longer than the rest of the tree. But we've kind of reduced it now, and I'm going to put some wire on it, or no, I have to prune it first, and then we'll put some wire on it. So let's go in. We have this little guy. I'm looking to cut back and thin. So like in this area, we have, this will be coming over the top to fill in the top of the pad, this little guy. And it's a little bit dense, so I can prune these back a bit. Prune these back a bit. And when we're pruning, we want to do like a directional pruning. So if I cut something off, if there is an opportunity to point something in the right direction so that in the future I will not have to wire it, that is ideal. So I will be pruning things that are going back, going straight down, going off to the sides. So this is going to be a little pad here, so we want to create a nice profile. This being the center. So when you're forming a pad, the first thing you want to do is choose the center, because then everything else is in relation to that. So the center of the pad, the branch that forms the center, is going to be the longest, and everything else is kind of in relation to that. So this is the center of my pad right here, and then this is going to be cut back, and it's very, very fine, fine pruning here, cutting off the smallest little things to get things going in the right direction, like this little guy coming off the bottom here, these guys coming off the bottom. I'm going to take that off. You want things to go up and out, not down. And we want the top, like I said, for the clamshell shape, you want the outer edge to be the longest, and then it slopes back. You don't want it to be like squared off. You want it to slope back. So we don't want anything on the top here that's going to extend out over the outer edge of the pad. Still has to fill in a little bit. We're going to leave some of these guys back in here, but we do want to push. We don't want to just let them grow. We need to prune them a little bit to push the growth back, because we want to make this denser. So I've kind of thinned this out, cut it back. Can probably put a little bit of wire on it just to get it in the right position. But it's actually pretty good. I mean, if you can see, it doesn't really need a lot of wire. It's kind of in the right position right now. But we are going to take some of these things that are growing off the bottom. Take those guys off, clean up the bottom of the pads. Okay, I'm done with that area. So now we'll move out to this. We have some back buds here. That's very, very good. So that's going to fill in. We're probably going to even cut it back more once these guys grow out and develop a little bit more. Then we can cut this all back. But in the meantime, we're going to cut this off, or prune it back, excuse me, not cut it off. We're going to prune it back. even when they're this small, you can actually start pruning this to where, to develop a nice branch. So if you can see this coming down off the bottom, even when it's a little dinky like this, we can go in and take that off and flatten it out a little bit so it will grow out in the right direction, putting the energy into where we want the energy to go. And since we want this to grow stronger back in here, we want to take some of the energy out of the tips. Because this one's a little bit shorter than this one. But since we're going to end up cutting it back anyway, we want these to grow. Those are the ones we want to develop. You can cut back as long as you have strong tips behind it. And since we don't want this to elongate, we want to keep it, we want to push it back. So we're not just going to let it. If we were trying to get back budding, then you let it blow out and grow really strong. But we've got back budding in here, and we want to, just let these guys grow. So we're going to push the energy back to these two. We've already got our back buds there, so I can prune this back. This is a good back bud right here that's going to develop into forming, replacing this pad. We have these coming out here, this one here. So we're going to be able to take this back to here, which is fantastic. That's what we're looking for.
When will that happen?
When will that happen? When these get big enough. I don't know if these are strong enough to keep growing and maintain themselves. They might die if you cut it back now. I would like to see them a little bit longer and healthier before I cut this off. So this, we're going to develop into a pad. I'm going to cut this back a bit here. So we don't want anything that's growing up is going to get stronger than stuff that's growing out. So there's a tendency for the fill stuff on the top of the pad to get stronger, while this may get a little bit weaker. So that's why we have to make sure that these things that are growing up, that we cut those back so they don't get too strong. Take a little bit of wire to move this around so it's pointing in the right direction. I'm going to do all my pruning on this part first, and then I'm going to go back and wire it. Okay, so this doesn't really have any back buds back in here. This didn't back bud at all. So we're just going to leave that there for the time being. Or can I take that whole thing off? I don't know. Let me think about this. Can I take that off? I think I can take that off. Okay, because these are the ones, this back budding here, these are the ones that are going to grow and eventually form the pad. This is all going to be cut back. Awfully leggy. I'm just going to cut this back a little bit. I'm going to keep this for a while, eventually cutting back to this. We are continuing to prune and cut back because we want the energy to go back into these back buds, because this is what's eventually going to form this pad, because it's back tighter, closer. So we're thinning out the outer edge of this so we can push back the energy back into these little guys. I'm not really concerned about the structure of this right now because it's going to get cut off in the future. So I'm just pruning it to get the energy to go back to those back buds. But I have to look at it too, so I want it to look nice on my bench. I try to maintain the aesthetic value as much as I possibly can so I can enjoy it. My experience has been the Kishu responds much better. I don't know if it's because of our microclimate here. The Atoyagawa goes juvenile if I look at it cross-eyed. So Kishu does have more problems with spider mites, and if you really want to see how you do pad development, Peter T did a golden zoom for GSBF, and it is on their website, and he discusses pad development in detail, and I think it would be, it's very worthwhile to watch. He does a much better job of explaining it than I do. Okay, so that's pretty well thinned out. You can see it's really done a lot to thin that out, so the energy will go back to these guys. This one's already getting a little bit leggy. Okay. So let's move up to this guy. Actually, this one looks really, if you can take a look at this is kind of what a nice pad should look like. You have the outer edge, you have fill back in, so it looks like that clamshell sloping back away from, from the edge back toward the inside of the tree. So this one's developing pretty nicely. Let's see what we need to do to thin it out a bit. But we want to keep it small. If we just let it grow, it's just going to get all out of shape. We want to prune it a little bit or cut it back a little bit to make it more dense, even more dense than it is now. You can see we're even getting back buds in here, so that's good. See the back buds in here? So that's all very good. That's all very good. I'm kind of looking at one of the things that you want to do when you're developing pads is, as you develop them, you want to look for opportunities to separate something into more pads. If you have one large pad, like this used to be one big pad, and as it grew and developed, we subdivided it into smaller pads. So that gives the tree more complexity, and it looks older. So I was looking at this to see if there was some opportunity here to divide this into maybe some subpads. Maybe like having this be one pad on this side, and then maybe have another pad over on this side. Looks like it's a little bit premature to do that, but at some point in the future, perhaps. Get this coming out down here. It's coming out. This could be a pad over in here, a small pad, perhaps. Thinking maybe I'm going to take this piece out right in here and start developing this into its own little pad. And then perhaps another smaller pad back in here. I'm going to keep this kind of small up in here. I want this to be the longer part of the branch down in here.
Continuing work on our most developed tree, we have finished pruning, thinning, and wiring the primary branch. Now we will continue working up the tree, branch by branch, thinning, pruning, and setting it up for next year's growth. On this next branch, we have the opportunity to separate into 3 separate pads, which will give the tree more complexity and make it look older. So we're going to prune, wire, thin, and set up three different pads on this branch. This is to give you an idea of the before thinning pruning, and then we'll do this again after so you can see the before and the after. with the white paper background, you can see the after pruning and thinning and wiring. At this point, we're about halfway done. We've pruned the primary, secondary, and back branch, so we're about halfway up the tree. You can see the primary branch, the secondary branch, and the back branch have all been pruned, and now we're going to move on. We will start with the next branch, which will be right in here. So here we are with the summer work completed on our more developed tree. Just to summarize what we've done, the primary branches on this tree were all well developed, so there was nothing that needed to be done to the primary branches on the tree other than perhaps just tweaking them a little bit to reposition them so they were in a better aesthetic position. The main work that was done was pad development. We went through the tree, thinned, pruned, wired, separated the larger pads into smaller units to give more complexity to the design. This branch, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pads here. This branch, we now have 3 pads. This branch, we have 3 pads, and all the way up the tree, whenever there was an opportunity to subdivide one pad into maybe 2 or 3 pads, we've done that. So that is essentially the work that was done on the top of the tree. We also added some shari to the base, as we had talked about. We added some shari here in the front And in the back, this is to add more interest to a not so interesting trunk. Also to try and force the lifeline on each side of these to now pump up further and add a little more flare to the base of the trunk. Maybe make this part of the tree look a little bit better. So essentially that's all the work that we've done. For the rest of the year, we're going to put it back on the bench. We're going to fertilize it, monitor it closely for disease, for pests, spider mites, pests, diseases, and continue development next year. If it grows enough in the next few months, we could possibly go in and do a little more fine pruning on the pads. Other than that, we're just setting it up for next year. It's a wrap.